They laughed when she said the land was hers, and then they called the police to remove her. What nobody knew, not the neighbors, not the HOA board, not even the officers arriving at the scene, was that hidden papers were about to turn the entire neighborhood upside down. The morning began like any other in Willow Ridge Estates. Perfect lawns. Quiet streets. Rules enforced with pride. Residents watered flowers while watching a woman they had never seen before standing near an old fence at the edge of the community. She looked calm, holding a worn leather folder and staring across acres of open land that stretched far beyond the polished houses. To the HOA, she was a problem. "She's trespassing," someone said. Within minutes, messages spread through the neighborhood chat group. The woman didn't look dangerous, just determined. But that only made people more suspicious. The HOA president arrived quickly, arms crossed, voice sharp, demanding she leave immediately. The woman introduced herself as Elena Vargas. "I'm just looking at my property," she said calmly. The president laughed. "This land belongs to the association," he replied. "You need to go." Elena didn't argue. She simply repeated herself. "No. This land belongs to me." That sentence changed everything. Neighbors gathered, whispering. Some rolled their eyes. Others recorded videos on their phones. The HOA board insisted she was lying, claiming no sale had ever happened. One member threatened legal action. Another dialed the police. Elena stayed still, her expression unreadable. When the patrol cars arrived, tension thickened. Officers stepped out cautiously, trying to understand the situation as HOA members spoke over each other, describing her as an intruder refusing to leave private property. The senior officer approached Elena politely. "Ma'am, do you have any proof this land belongs to you?" She hesitated. Not because she didn't have proof, but because the proof wasn't simple. The documents she carried were old, tied to something buried in the past. Something nobody in Willow Ridge even knew existed. "I do," she said quietly. "But you might want everyone here to listen first." The HOA president scoffed. "This is ridiculous. Just remove her." The officer held up a hand, signaling for patience. Elena slowly opened the worn leather folder. Inside were faded papers, some decades old, stamped and signed in ways that made the officer's expression change immediately. He read carefully. Then looked up at the crowd. Silence fell. The laughter stopped. Because suddenly, the situation wasn't about trespassing anymore. It was about ownership. And the truth hiding inside those papers would shake Willow Ridge harder than anyone imagined. The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said cautiously, "where did you get these?" Elena closed the folder gently. "That," she replied, "is a much longer story." And before anyone realized it, the woman they tried to remove was about to reveal a secret connected to 2,000 acres, a secret that would make the HOA wish they had never called the police at all. The crowd that had gathered expecting a simple removal suddenly grew quiet. The officer held the documents carefully, flipping each page slower than before. The faded ink, the official seals, and the county signatures were unmistakably real. Whatever Elena Vargas carried, it wasn't something made up overnight. Even the HOA president noticed the shift in the officer's posture. "What does it say?" someone whispered. The officer didn't answer immediately. He glanced at Elena, then back at the HOA board standing nearby, confident just moments earlier but now visibly uneasy. "These are property records," he said finally. "Older ones." The president stepped forward. "That land is part of our association plans. We've maintained it for years." Elena spoke calmly. "Maintaining something doesn't mean owning it." A few neighbors exchanged looks. That statement felt heavier than it sounded. The officer kept reading. The documents described land boundaries stretching far beyond the visible fields. Dates appeared from decades ago, long before Willow Ridge Estates existed. There were references to inheritance clauses, protected ownership rights, and legal language that none of the HOA members seemed prepared for. One officer quietly radioed dispatch, requesting verification from county records. The mood changed completely. Phones that had been recording for entertainment were now capturing real tension. Some residents stepped back, realizing this might become a serious legal confrontation. The HOA president forced a smile. Even if those papers are old, things change. Land gets reassigned. Elena shook her head. Not when conditions were never met. The words confused everyone except the officer holding the folder. He paused at one page and looked up sharply. "This mentions a trust," he said. Elena nodded slowly. "A hidden land trust. Created by the original owner before the development was built." Silence spread again. Willow Ridge residents had always believed the neighborhood was carefully planned from the beginning. Nobody mentioned a trust. Nobody mentioned private rights still attached to the surrounding acreage. The officer received a reply through his radio. His expression shifted again, this time toward caution. "County records confirm the parcel exists," he announced. "And ownership currently lists Elena Vargas." Gasps broke out around the crowd. The HOA president's face turned pale. "That's impossible." Elena finally allowed herself a small breath. "It's not impossible," she said softly. "It was just hidden." Neighbors started murmuring. Some looked angry at the HOA. Others looked confused, wondering how something this big had gone unnoticed. The officer handed back the folder respectfully. "Ma'am, based on this, you're within your rights to be here." Those words hit harder than any argument. The police weren't removing her. They were protecting her rights. The HOA board stepped aside, stunned. But the biggest shock wasn't the ownership itself. It was the question now spreading through everyone's minds. If the land truly belonged to Elena, why had it been hidden for so long? And why did the original owner go to such lengths to keep it secret? Elena closed the folder carefully, knowing the hardest part of the story hadn't even begun. The police cars stayed parked as the crowd refused to leave. What began as a simple HOA complaint had turned into something bigger, a mystery tied to the very land Willow Ridge Estate sat beside. People whispered, pointing at Elena Vargas as if she had appeared out of nowhere holding a secret they were never meant to see. The HOA president recovered first. "There has to be a mistake," he said sharply. "That land has been managed by this community for years." Elena looked at him calmly. "Managed isn't the same as owned." The officer nodded slightly, confirming the distinction. But curiosity had already taken over the neighborhood. Residents wanted answers, and Elena knew avoiding the story would only make things worse. She glanced at the open fields, taking a slow breath. "The land belonged to a man named Arthur Hale," she began. Several older residents frowned, recognizing the name vaguely. Long before Willow Ridge was built, Arthur had owned massive farmlands stretching across the area. Developers bought most of it decades ago, turning sections into modern neighborhoods. But not all of it. He didn't trust the developers, Elena explained. He kept a portion protected under a private trust. The HOA president scoffed. "That was ages ago. This community has legal boundaries." "Yes," Elena replied, "boundaries that stop at this fence." The officer checked the map again. The lines were clear. Elena continued. "Arthur had been quiet, stubborn, and rarely seen. Over time, as development grew, people forgot about him. The land around his property transformed into manicured streets and HOA rules. Everyone assumed the remaining acreage would eventually become part of the neighborhood. But Arthur had other plans. He created a hidden trust with strict conditions. The land could only transfer to someone chosen personally, someone who agreed to preserve it, not develop it. The documents were designed to stay unnoticed unless certain legal triggers were met. And those triggers happened recently," Elena said. A resident stepped forward. How do you know him? Elena hesitated, then answered honestly. He saved my life during a storm years ago. We stayed in contact after that. The crowd grew quiet again. Arthur had apparently shared stories with her, stories about feeling pressured by expanding developments, about receiving constant offers to sell, about fears that his land would disappear after he was gone. When he passed, Elena said softly, the trust activated. The HOA president shook his head aggressively. None of this was disclosed to us. Elena's expression hardened slightly. Because it was never yours to control. Those words stung. Around them, residents started realizing the truth: the HOA had assumed authority over something they never actually owned. Years of confident statements suddenly looked like guesses built on assumption. The officer cleared his throat. Legally speaking, the documents appear valid. Any dispute would need to go through civil court. That wasn't the answer the HOA wanted. But the biggest tension still remained. If Elena truly owned 2,000 acres beside Willow Ridge, what would she do with it? Build? Sell? Change everything? The crowd waited, but Elena closed the folder again. That, she said quietly, depends on whether this community can learn the truth before judging me. By sunset, everyone in Willow Ridge knew her name. Elena Vargas. Some said she was lucky. Others called her a fraud. Social media groups filled with arguments, screenshots, and opinions from people who had never even spoken to her. The HOA board quickly shifted from shock to damage control, sending emails claiming they were reviewing the situation to protect residents. That phrase lit the fire. Neighbors began asking questions the HOA couldn't answer. How had 2,000 acres been overlooked? Why didn't anyone know about Arthur Hale? And most importantly, what would Elena do now? Instead of waiting for answers, people made assumptions. The next morning, Elena arrived at the land to find several residents standing near the fence, arms crossed. Some filmed her as she walked. One woman stepped forward, clearly angry. We moved here for peace, she said. Are you going to build something? I haven't decided anything yet, Elena replied calmly. That's not reassuring, another resident snapped. Before she could respond, a pickup truck pulled up. The HOA president stepped out, holding a stack of papers. We're requesting an emergency injunction, he announced loudly, making sure everyone heard. Until ownership is fully reviewed. Elena stared at him. You already know the records are real. He smiled thinly. That doesn't mean the community accepts this. The crowd murmured in agreement. For the first time, Elena felt the weight of standing alone. She had expected resistance from the HOA, not from ordinary people. They looked at her like an outsider trying to take something away, not someone protecting what was legally hers. She opened the folder again, but stopped. Showing papers wouldn't change emotions. Instead, she asked a simple question. Did any of you ever meet Arthur Hale? Silence. Most shook their heads. He lived right next to you, she said softly. And you never knew him. That comment made people uncomfortable, but it didn't calm the tension. The HOA president stepped closer. This isn't about the past, he said. It's about our future. Elena looked across the land, endless fields swaying quietly in the wind. Arthur had told her this would happen. People fear what they don't control. Suddenly, a police car slowed near the road. Not for conflict this time, just patrol. Yet the sight reminded everyone of yesterday's confrontation. A man from the crowd spoke up. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Elena answered honestly. Because I knew you'd react like this. That only fueled the anger. By afternoon, signs appeared near driveways, protect our neighborhood. Discussions turned into accusations. Some residents claimed property values would drop. Others feared construction noise, traffic, or strangers entering the area. The HOA watched the chaos grow and quietly encouraged it. Elena stood alone at the fence again, realizing something painful. Winning legally was easy. Winning people's trust would be much harder. And she still hadn't revealed the real reason Arthur chose her, a truth that would either calm the neighborhood, or make everything worse. The protests started small. A few handmade signs near the entrance. Quiet conversations that stopped when Elena walked past. But within days, the tension around Willow Ridge grew heavier. The HOA encouraged community unity meetings, which were really chances to question Elena's intentions again and again. She understood their fear, but she also knew fear came from missing information. And there was one truth she had not shared yet. Late one afternoon, Elena stood near the old fence when a small group of residents approached cautiously. Unlike the others, they looked more curious than angry. A woman spoke first. "Why you?" she asked gently. "Out of everyone, why did he choose you?" Elena hesitated. This was the question she had avoided. She opened the leather folder, not to show legal papers this time, but a photograph, faded, slightly bent at the corners. It showed Arthur Hale sitting on a farmhouse porch beside her, both covered in blankets during a storm. "The night we met," she said quietly, "I almost died out here." Years earlier, a flash flood had stranded her while she was driving through the area. Roads disappeared underwater. Phones lost signal. Arthur found her car half submerged and pulled her to safety. He gave her shelter for 3 days while the storm passed. "He didn't even know my name," she continued. "He just helped." As she spoke, more neighbors slowed nearby to listen. During those days, Arthur shared his worries, how developers kept pushing, how the growing neighborhood ignored him, how he feared the land would become nothing but profit once he was gone. Elena listened when nobody else did. "We stayed in contact after that," she said. "I visited sometimes. Helped with paperwork. Learned the history." One man frowned. "So he just gave you everything?" "No," she replied softly. "He trusted me with a promise. The promise was simple: protect the land from being divided, sold, or controlled by organizations that saw it only as value on paper." When Arthur's health declined, he updated the trust quietly. No announcements. No drama. He didn't want a fight, Elena said. He wanted peace. The crowd grew silent. Someone asked, "Why keep it hidden?" "Because he knew pressure would come," she answered. "And he wanted the decision protected until the right moment." That moment had arrived the day the trust transferred legally. For the first time, some faces softened. The story didn't match the image the HOA had painted. Still, not everyone was convinced. The HOA president appeared again, stepping into the group with practiced confidence. "Emotional stories don't change the fact this affects everyone here." Elena looked at him steadily. "Neither does fear." He leaned closer. "Then tell them your plan." She paused. Because the plan wasn't about building or profit, it was something bigger, something Arthur believed could unite the community instead of dividing it. And once she revealed it, there would be no going back. The crowd waited. Even the HOA president stayed quiet for once, sensing that whatever Elena was about to say could change the direction of the entire conflict. Neighbors gathered closer, their earlier anger now mixed with curiosity. Elena took a slow breath. "Arthur didn't want this land developed," she began. "And I don't either." Whispers moved through the group. "If you're not building," someone asked, "then what are you doing with 2,000 acres? Elena opened her folder and pulled out large maps. She spread them carefully on the hood of her car so everyone could see. Instead of construction outlines or housing plots, the maps showed walking trails, preserved forest sections, community gardens, and open spaces marked for wildlife protection. Gasps escaped from several people. "I'm creating a protected land trust," she said. "The land stays open. No private development. No resale. The HOA president frowned. Public access, he asked sharply. Yes, Elena replied. Controlled and respectful. For education, nature programs, and emergency access routes. The land will be preserved. The reaction split instantly. Some residents looked relieved. Others looked worried. A man crossed his arms. That means outsiders coming in. It means the land survives, Elena answered calmly. She explained that Arthur's trust included clauses encouraging community benefit. The acreage could support local programs, environmental restoration, even safe routes during floods or emergencies, something the area had once struggled with. The more she explained, the quieter the crowd became. Because this wasn't the dramatic takeover they imagined. It was something thoughtful. Still, the HOA president wasn't ready to lose control. You're changing the character of this neighborhood without approval. Elena met his gaze. The character of a place comes from people, not rules. That line stayed in the air. A woman from the crowd spoke carefully. So, you're not taking anything from us? Elena shook her head. I'm keeping something from disappearing. More residents started stepping forward, asking questions instead of accusing her. Parents liked the idea of trails, older residents liked preserved nature. Even some who had protested earlier admitted the plan sounded better than new construction. The HOA president noticed the shift and grew more rigid. This isn't over, he warned. The board will review all options. But for the first time, his words sounded weaker. As the crowd slowly dispersed, a few people thanked Elena quietly. Not loudly, not yet, but enough for her to feel the tension easing. She thought the hardest part might be over. Then her phone rang. It was a call from the county office. After confirming several details, the voice on the line delivered unexpected news. Another section of paperwork connected to Arthur's trust had been located, documents nobody knew existed. And according to those papers, the story of the land was even bigger than Elena realized. She looked back across the fields, suddenly uncertain. Because if the new documents were what she suspected, the HOA hadn't just called the police on the wrong person. They had challenged a legacy far larger than any of them imagined. Elena drove to the county records office the next morning with a feeling she couldn't explain. The call had been brief but urgent. A clerk said they had uncovered sealed paperwork connected to Arthur Hale's original trust documents that had only surfaced during a deeper verification process after the police report. Even the clerk sounded surprised. When Elena arrived, a stack of old files waited for her in a quiet office. The first thing she noticed was the date. The papers had been filed decades ago, long before Willow Ridge Estates was built, before the HOA even existed. Arthur had prepared for something far beyond a simple inheritance. As she read, her hands tightened around the folder. The trust didn't just protect land. It protected purpose. One clause explained that if the acreage ever came under pressure from organizations trying to control or divide it, ownership would automatically shift with expanded rights to the chosen successor, rights stronger than standard property ownership. Another section outlined boundaries that extended farther than anyone realized. Elena's breath caught. The trust didn't just include the open fields. It included access routes, buffer zones, and environmental easements that bordered sections of the HOA itself. Arthur had thought ahead. Very far ahead. The county attorney entered quietly. These were overlooked because they were archived under a legacy conservation program, he explained. Legally, they're still binding. Elena nodded slowly. The weight of responsibility grew heavier. Back in Willow Ridge, rumors spread quickly that she had gone to the county office. By the time she returned, several residents were waiting near the entrance, along with the HOA president and 2 board members. You've been busy, he said sharply. I have new information, Elena replied calmly. He crossed his arms. Whatever this is, the association has rights too. Elena opened the folder and handed him a copied page. His expression changed as he read. "This can't be real," he muttered. "It is," she said. "Arthur designed the trust so the land could never be absorbed or controlled by any HOA or development." A small crowd gathered again, drawn by the tension. "What does that mean?" someone asked. Elena answered carefully. "It means the land is protected permanently. And some areas you thought were HOA managed, legally aren't." Gasps and whispers spread instantly. The president's face flushed. "You're trying to undermine this community." "No," Elena replied quietly. "I'm honoring what was already written." For years, the HOA had acted as if expansion was inevitable. These papers proved the opposite. Arthur had ensured the land would outlive any temporary authority. Some residents looked stunned. Others suddenly seemed impressed. The power dynamic shifted again. But Elena wasn't celebrating. Because she realized something else while reading the documents. Arthur left one final instruction sealed separately, to be opened only when conflict reached its peak. And judging by the reactions around her, that moment had arrived. Whatever was inside that final instruction could end the fight completely or ignite it more than ever before. Elena closed the folder slowly. She wasn't sure Willow Ridge was ready for what came next. The tension in Willow Ridge felt different now. It wasn't just anger or confusion anymore, it was uncertainty. Residents walked slower, conversations turned cautious, and even the HOA board seemed less confident after learning the new documents limited their authority. The land they once assumed would eventually belong to the community was protected beyond their reach. Elena stood alone inside the farmhouse that evening, the final sealed envelope resting on the table. Arthur's handwriting covered the front. To be opened only when the land is challenged. Her hands hesitated before opening it. Inside was a letter, short, simple, and more personal than she expected. He wrote about watching the neighborhood grow around him, about how people forgot the history beneath their feet. He never hated the community, he explained. He only feared that control would replace care. The land, to him, was not a possession but a responsibility passed through generations. Then came the final instruction. Arthur wanted a public gathering on the land. Not a legal meeting. Not an HOA debate. A gathering where the truth would be shared openly and where the future would be decided with transparency, not fear. He trusted Elena to do one thing. Give the community a chance to understand before judging. The next day, she announced the gathering. The HOA tried to discourage attendance, sending warnings about ongoing legal questions, but people came anyway. Families, curious neighbors, even former critics arrived, standing beneath the open sky as the wind moved across the fields. Elena stepped forward with the letter. She read Arthur's words aloud. As she spoke, the mood shifted. The anger that once fueled accusations softened into something quieter. Arthur's voice, captured through simple handwriting, felt honest, the words of someone who never wanted conflict, only protection. He wrote this for all of you, Elena said gently. Not just for me. The HOA president interrupted. This doesn't change legal realities. A man from the crowd turned toward him. Maybe it changes perspective. Others nodded. Elena revealed the final part of Arthur's plan, a community advisory role within the land trust. Residents could participate in preserving and caring for the land, but no organization would ever control or profit from it. That changed everything. People realized they weren't losing something. They were being invited into something bigger. Questions came quickly about trails, safety, programs for children, environmental projects. The discussion felt collaborative instead of hostile. Even those who once protested listened carefully. The HOA board looked isolated for the first time. Elena finished reading the letter's final line. Land survives when people stop trying to own everything. Silence followed, deep and thoughtful. Then quiet applause. It spread slowly, growing stronger until the entire field echoed with it. The battle that started with police sirens was fading into understanding. But one final moment remained. Because the HOA president hadn't accepted defeat yet, and his next move would determine whether peace truly settled over Willow Ridge, or whether the fight would start again. The applause faded, but the meaning stayed. For the first time since Elena arrived, Willow Ridge felt quiet, not the forced quiet of rules and warnings, but the calm that comes when people finally understand what they are standing on. The open fields around them no longer felt like empty space waiting to be controlled. They felt alive with history. The HOA president stepped forward once more, trying to regain authority. "This gathering doesn't erase structure," he said firmly. "The community still needs order." But his words didn't carry the same weight anymore. Residents listened politely, yet their focus kept drifting back toward the land and the letter Elena held. A woman from the crowd spoke carefully. "Maybe order doesn't mean control." Others nodded. Elena didn't argue. She simply explained the final legal step: the land trust was officially active, permanently protected, and structured to include community participation without giving any organization ownership. Trails would be built slowly. Conservation efforts would begin. Programs would be guided by volunteers and local experts. No fences. No private development. No hidden agendas. The crowd reacted with cautious optimism. The HOA board exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the story had moved beyond them. This wasn't a fight anymore, it was a change in perspective they couldn't stop. Over the next few weeks, something surprising happened. Residents who once protested began volunteering. Families helped clear paths, retired neighbors offered gardening knowledge. Children painted signs for future nature walks. Even people who had yelled at Elena now thanked her for explaining Arthur's vision instead of fighting back. The land became a shared purpose. The HOA didn't disappear, but its tone changed. Meetings grew less confrontational. Rules relaxed. The board slowly adapted as residents pushed for cooperation instead of conflict. One evening, Elena stood near the old fence where police cars had once arrived to remove her. The same officer who had first asked for proof happened to pass by on patrol and stopped briefly. "Funny how things turn out," he said. Elena smiled. "All because of papers people didn't want to believe." He nodded. "Sometimes the truth just needs time." As months passed, Willow Ridge gained something unexpected: identity beyond property values. People came to walk the trails and learn about the history of the land. Arthur Hale's name appeared on a simple wooden sign near the entrance, not as a hero, but as someone who protected something meaningful. The HOA president eventually approached Elena quietly. "I thought you were taking something from us," he admitted. She looked across the fields. "I was giving it back." He didn't argue.
The story that started with association police calls and hidden documents ended with understanding. The 2000 acres reminder untouched by grade, guided by a promise one man made long ago, and fulfilled by a woman brave enough to stand alone when everyone doubted her. And in the end, Willow Ridge learned a lesson it would never forget.